I'm Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the DSM, and then we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about the signs and symptoms of self-hatred. Now, self-hatred in and of itself is not a diagnosis. It's a reaction and it's a symptom to trauma. But speaking of diagnosis, that'll move us into talking about the DSM. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Every mental health clinician knows this, and we use this to diagnose people. This is what it looks like. Now, if you can believe that, these are like all the mental disorders that a human being can have. Now, for those of you in the know, I know this already. This is the DSM-4. It's not the DSM-5. There is a new version, and it's a little smaller. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is a massive book of supposed disorders. And they're voted on by mental health clinicians. This is not what you would call a hard science. It's more of a soft science. And the people who vote on these disorders that get in this book, most of them tend to be psychiatrists. And they don't actually do therapy on people. I mean, they might a little, but most of the time what they're doing is they're dispensing drugs to people. And so you might think, if they're pushing big pharma, why wouldn't you want to have more disorders to be able to use a drug to handle those problems? Right? Now, there's a reason why I'm saying this today, because I want to move into the thought that we can simplify this. Let's demystify a lot of this, because I see this a lot with lay people today. They're talking about, is this person antisocial? Are they narcissistic? What does this mean? Is there a difference between histrionic and borderline? And you know what? Why do we care? Let me simplify this for you. Everything in this book, except for, I would say, mental retardation and autism, is caused by one thing. Just one. Real or perceived trauma. So let's just take that. Real or perceived trauma. Now, I say perceived because perception is people's reality. It might not seem like a big trauma to somebody, but to somebody else it is. There's a lot of people today, because they were coddled so much when they were younger, that they think everyday life is a major trauma, and other people can't understand it. So that's your answer, is that some people look at life as trauma. They have massive anxiety. They don't move on their anxiety because they're afraid of it. They weren't taught to move through it. Then it becomes depression. But really all of that is because of their perceived trauma. Now, what's the result of real and perceived trauma? Again, we have a laundry list. We can go anxiety, depression, bipolar. We go from mood disorders to personality disorders. We can name all of them. For most people, it doesn't matter. It's only one thing. It's emotional dysregulation. People don't like how they feel. So what happens from there? They try to manage those feelings and emotions the best way they can. Here's how I look at it. We have a continuum. There's a trauma at the top, causes emotional dysregulation. So now that we have a continuum, we could say we have minimal emotional dysregulation to maximum emotional dysregulation. And then we could figure out in between, what is somebody doing in order to mitigate that? Some people sit around and watch TV all day. Right? Some people do drugs. Some people hurt other people to make themselves feel a little better. Some people become really grandiose to put up this fake front that they're great people. Why? To get admiration from people. So it's all based on the same thing. Trauma equals emotional dysregulation. Then what do we do, and how do they deal with that emotional dysregulation? So that's how we simplify that. That's why when I talk about self-hatred today, it's not a diagnosis, but does it make a big difference in a lot of people's lives? Of course it does. So I don't want to talk about treatment today because there's too much information in the show anyway, and it gets to be too long. So let's just talk about some signs and some symptoms. So number one, if you're trying to figure out if deep down inside you have self-hatred, or if you're with people around you that actually inside have a lot of hatred for themselves. Number one, do they constantly compare themselves to other people? Are they envious? Are they jealous? Do they perceive everything to be mostly negative about themselves? Do they perceive mostly negative things about other people and the world? And that's a good way to cause depression as well. Do you believe that you maybe are not good enough? Or do you know someone who, when they speak, it seems obvious that they don't believe that they're good enough, deep down inside? So self-hatred, it refers to feelings of guilt, which guilt is not always a bad thing. Sometimes guilt means that we just feel like we could have done something better, right? So it's our own conscience getting the best of us to say, we could have done that a little better. And because of guilt, I'm much more likely to do better next time. So that's not terrible, but it could also lead to shame. And the difference between guilt and shame is when guilt says I did a bad thing, shame says I am a bad thing. I suck. I'm a bad human being. And of course, to our original point, that's a sign of self-hatred. People who don't like themselves or have self-hatred, they tend to feel inadequate, whether they are or they're not. They have low self-esteem. They have difficulty making decisions because they never feel like they're going to make the right decision. They have difficulty connecting with other people. They have difficulty achieving goals. They have difficulty dealing with people that have differences of opinions or that they actually run their life different than them. So they become very, let's say, judgmental of other people because they're basing everybody else's opinions on how they live off of what they do. Again, there's a fine line here between self-hatred and narcissism. They have difficulty listening to other people without thinking inside, how does this affect me? Again, there's a line or a thread that you can draw towards narcissism here, but I'm trying to leave out, again, I want to leave out the technical terms today. Again, we're going to simplify it. Trauma leads to emotional dysregulation, and then people react to that by trying to neutralize those feelings. Now, a person who has self-hatred, the chances of them telling you that they hate themselves, it's there because on the continuum, there are people who walk around like that. They will tell you, I hate myself, I hate my life, and I'm going to kill myself. Like, they will literally tell you that. That's true. That's on the continuum. Obviously, that would be way on one side. But most people won't tell you that. Most people, though, you can tell because they have dysfunctional thinking patterns. There's a lot of them. I'm going to name about 10 or so, just so I don't bore everybody by making a long show. So let's start off with number one. All or nothing thinking, which some people call that black and white thinking. I like to call it 100% versus 0%. Typically, when I'm doing therapy with people, I'll have them look at different perspectives because I really believe most of the time, or almost all of the time, that nothing is 100% to 0%. There's always something on the other side. So again, all or nothing thinking. You would know this by people who tend to love something a lot, let's say it on one day, and then the next day, they're done with it. They hate it. It can be that way, again, in narcissism, where they idolize somebody or they idealize somebody, and then the next moment, no problem, they want to devalue them, right? So we've seen this. People who are all in on a project, and then the next second, they're all out and they don't want to see it again. People who negotiate or talk to other people or have disagreements, and they continuously use ultimatums. Okay, that would be another sign of all or nothing type of thinking, which again, that would lead to someone who's actually has a lot of self-hatred. Number two, they tend to focus on the negative. Typically, or always, we might say here, is that they're always looking for the thorn instead of the rose. right? So a bunch of good things could have happened that day, which, let's just start with the basics. You know, if you wake up in the morning and you got dressed and you got some food, like these are all good things to start off with. You know, there's a lot of people that are not going to make it through today. So it's good to be grateful of everything you have. But there's a lot of people that they just need to say something negative. They only focus on that negative. Number 3, catastrophizing. Always thinking or believing the worst case scenario. And again, something will happen and they immediately go, my whole life is over, this job is terrible, my boss left a message for me. I didn't listen to it yet, but I think he's firing me, right? It immediately goes to a catastrophizing. Or you're at work and your boss says, hey, I need to talk to you at like 1:15. And it's say 9 o'clock in the morning. So for the next 4 hours and 15 minutes, they're thinking, oh my God, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. This is the worst thing possible. You might be called in because you need to sign some paperwork for your next raise. But they wouldn't think like that, right? They want to catastrophize. Moving on. Number 4, they believe that feeling is a fact. So there are some people who justify their feelings at the expense of facts. In other words, I feel bad, so what somebody did to me has to be bad. It can't be neutral. Why would it be neutral? Because I feel bad. So I have to say that they did something bad, right? So they're trying to justify their feelings and their emotions. And we tend to live in a culture like this, right? We live in a very offended, outraged culture all the time. It can't be that you can't handle your emotions, right? Again, on our continuum, because then that would take some amount of personal responsibility. So then what somebody will do is say, that person right there, they're bad. They did it and they made me feel this way. You know, as we grow in emotional intelligence, we should realize that people don't make us feel anything. We kind of choose, well, let me rephrase. We choose the way we feel, each and every time. Moving on, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, low self-esteem. I'm going to attack it from a slightly different way though. People with low self-esteem, they tend to hurt other people sometimes to make themselves feel a little bit better. It's like having a hot potato, right? Again, emotional dysregulation. So you have feelings and emotions. I can't handle it. I don't want it on me anymore. So they throw it to somebody else. And how do they do that? They'll say negative things. They put somebody down. It's always on the attack, the accusation, the moving forward, because they don't want to accept how they feel to take responsibility, so they'll tend to throw it on somebody else. Moving on, number 6, self-abuse. A lot of people mention this as a drug and alcohol abuse. I don't look at it like that. Those are inanimate objects. What I want to worry about is why you're hurting yourself. So again, it is self-abuse. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's drugs, it's alcohol, it's, let's say, pornography, it could be gambling. Actually, I think being outraged all the time, being offended, how you see in this country a lot, I think is also a form of self-abuse. And then you're also with the low self-esteem, so you're trying to hurt other people as well. I see this on Facebook. You put something on Facebook and it could be the most simplest thing. I noticed this the other day. I have, as you notice, Lola is in the background here. I have a video of Lola, rolling in the grass. And it was like a 1-minute video I had. And then there was another video, like 15 seconds. I looked at it the other day because I wanted to see Lola again. And it's funny, like somebody put a dislike on it. Like, how in the world could you put a dislike on a pug rolling around in the grass? Like, what would possess somebody to think, I know, I'm going to try with my anger or negativity to hurt somebody else by putting a dislike on somebody's video with their dog. Like, who would go through the trouble to do that, right? There's got to be a lot of self-hatred like that, because people who are happy with their life and happy with themselves don't do things like that. And again, I'm not hurt by it, okay? As a therapist, I wonder, like, what is going along, in somebody's brain, emotionally, that they would go out of their way to do that. And there's much worse examples, but I'll just give you one that happened last night. I was just thinking about that. Let's move on. Number 7. People with self-hatred, they tend to punish themselves and they punish other people by sabotaging relationships. They sabotage jobs, and they tend to sabotage other people's success. You know, you hear these people all the time. It's like somebody will say, I really want to go on a diet. I want to lose 15 pounds. Like, oh, you can't do that. That's so hard. There's no way you could do that. What they're saying is that they can't do it. They don't want to put in the time and effort. And so they're doing the crab in a bucket, where they're trying to be this crab. And as the crab starts crawling up the bucket to get out, to be free, you know, to get its goal, they grab and they pull it back down. So that's what people with self-hatred do. They just want to bring everybody down to their level. And of course, typically they don't get better until they take a good look at themselves. Number 8, people with self-hatred tend to validate themselves with chronic venting, chronic complaining, chronic blaming. And so what they do is that they're doing this all the time to conjure up this thing of validating themselves, because they feel like somebody else is not validating them. And they want that. Again, there's a thread here, right, to a reverse narcissist, where some narcissists think, I'm all this, I'm great. Most people agree with me, so I can get away with it. So there's other narcissists that go, oh, I suck, I'm bad, I'm terrible at everything, you need to help me. No matter how much you're helping me, I'm not going to help you along, so you need to help me more. Give me more money, give me more time, give me more effort, please. You know, those types of people that just live in victimhood, right? Those are narcissists as well. They want all the attention on them. Moving on. Number 9, people who have a lot of self-hatred, they're emotionally invested, many times, not all the times, but they're emotionally invested in a one-side story that makes them the victim, everybody else are the perpetrators. And what this does is it leaves little to no chance for improvement, because they're not seeing any of the other perspectives, the other sides of the story, what somebody else maybe can do. They're not looking for a solution-focused type of look. Again, they're looking to magnify the negative, and they're making them the hero of the story that's being crucified. Thinking like that is not conducive to a good outcome. And number 10, people with self-hatred tend to take most things personally. But again, it's towards the negative. So if somebody says something, or they don't call them back right away, they'll think, that person hates me, they don't like me, they're trying to hurt me. So now I'm going to do something to hurt them. Ironically, or interestingly, they don't tend to take the good things personally. Whereas, let's say you go to a gym and somebody starts to lose weight, and you may not have talked to them, but they might be actually very inspired by how you show up every day. And then they're losing weight, and they're stealing some of your exercises. And instead of feeling proud about that and feeling just honored by that, they'll go, that person is terrible, right? So they're still saying something negative. Or if a person starts to change their style of clothing, you know, something to that effect that might be an honoring of somebody, they'll take that as a negative. Also, if somebody does go out of their way to say something positive, a person with self-hatred will have extreme difficulty accepting a compliment. They can do a couple of things here. They could just say no, right? They'll say, no, I don't deserve that. No, not me. I didn't do anything. In other words, self-hatred. They can't accept the love that's given to them. The other part, they'll just ignore it and just not mention it, because they think there's something wrong with saying these 2 words. Thank you. Right? That is the acceptable way to handle a compliment from anybody. So if anybody compliments you and you're having a little bit of low self-esteem, maybe a little bit of self-hatred, one of the ways, and we're not going to talk about the treatment today, but here's part of the treatment, is to go back against your normal inclination, to deny how good you are, to deny that somebody else thinks you're good, to deny that you might actually you're being praised by somebody. Instead of denying all that and ignoring it, just look them right in the eye and say, thank you. And that'll be the first part for you accepting goodness into your life. So I hope the show was valuable to you. I'm Joe Peroni from the Rise Above Project. If you thought this was valuable, please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.